Hi guys, Dr. Rob Barrington here with some more nutrition advice. I've had a request to talk about vitamin K, the differences in the forms of vitamin K. So I thought I'd do a quick video on some of the information that I've put on my blog previously about vitamin K and just discuss the different forms there are in the diet and the physiological effects that they have. Vitamin K is not a single compound. There are actually different compounds that share vitamin K activity, and there are three really that are important to human in human nutrition. Phyloquinone is vitamin K1, and that is found in plants. It's synthesized in plants, and therefore plants are the best source of vitamin K1. The types of plants that contain vitamin K1, interestingly, many of the brassica family vegetables are very good sources of vitamin K1, but generally green leafy vegetables will contain high levels of vitamin K1, which is also called phyloquinone. There is a group of chemicals which have different chain lengths, and these are called the menaquinones, and these are actually synthesized by bacteria. And because they're synthesized by bacteria, we find them in any foods that have an origin with bacterial activity in or around them, or have previously eaten foods that may have contained some of that activity. So meat does contain a certain amount of menaquinones, and we produce menaquinones ourselves. We have colonic gut bacteria that are able to synthesize menaquinones. And therefore menaquinones are more widely distributed in foods, but they tend to be in lower amounts. Phyloquinone is generally absorbed in the small intestine, but menaquinone, because it's synthesized in the colon, there is evidence that menaquinone is absorbed in the colon. So most of the gastrointestinal tract is able to absorb vitamin K. There's actually a third form of vitamin K, vitamin K3, and that is called menadione, and menadione is actually a man-made derivative of vitamin K. It has vitamin K activity. It has to be enzymatically altered when it enters cells to have that activity, but it's a synthetic form and it does have vitamin K activity. So those are the three forms of vitamin that of the vitamin K that we find in human food, and most people will get most of their vitamin K from their green leafy vegetables, but there is increasing evidence that we produce a lot of vitamin K in our guts, and that does contribute to the vitamin K that we have obviously in our bodies. So what is the physiological role of vitamin K? Well, vitamin K is quite interesting. Vitamin K is required for post-translational modification of proteins. Now that sounds very technical. What it really means is when DNA creates a protein, some of those proteins are in an inactive form, and vitamin K is required to activate some of those proteins in order for them to be able to have activity. What it does is it activates particular residues on particular proteins, and then those proteins become active and they can have physiological effects. Now when we think of the physiological activities of vitamin K, what we really need to think about is blood, bone and cancer. Those are the three areas that vitamin K is recognized to have physiological activities. If we look at blood, vitamin K is required for the post-translational modification of proteins, in particular some of the clotting factors. It's clotting factor 2, clotting factor 7, clotting factor 9 and clotting factor 10. Those proteins are not active unless vitamin K activates them through this post-translational carboxylation process. When they have been activated by vitamin K, they can then proceed to take part in the blood clotting process. So a vitamin K deficiency will stop that clotting process, which is why vitamin K is traditionally known to be required for blood clotting. If we look at bones, there is a protein in bone called osteocalcin, and osteocalcin requires this post-translational carboxylation by vitamin K, and when it has been modified by vitamin K to become active, it can then bind three molecules of calcium, and that is involved then in bone formation, and that explains the reason why vitamin K is required for healthy bones. So those are the two most well-known examples of post-translational carboxylation by vitamin K. But there are others, and I'm sure there will be others that will be discovered. And this is why you need to think of blood clotting and bone formation as being intimately involved with vitamin K metabolism. Now, the third area where vitamin K is shown to have physiological activity is actually as an anti-cancer agent. Now, this is much more speculative, and much of the research has been done in cell culture lines. And I've always said that you have to be very careful when looking at cell culture experiments, because compounds can act as anti-cancer agents in cell culture, but they often don't have the same effects in the organism as a whole. Now, if we look at what's been done with vitamin K, most of the work's actually been done on menadione, which is the vitamin K3, the synthetic form, and I would suggest that's possibly because it is a drug. It's been artificially synthesized, and most anti-cancer work is really done with drugs. They're looking for drugs that fight cancer, because there's more profit in that really than looking at vitamins and natural compounds. So that's historically why vitamin K3 is probably the compound that has been most heavily researched. But there is research in cell culture with phyloquinone, vitamin K1, and vitamin K, when added to certain cell culture lines, does seem to have detrimental effects on the cells, so therefore it might have anti-cancer effects. Human studies have been done with some limited human studies have been done, clinical trials with vitamin K to analyse the anti-cancer effects, and there were positive effects seen, but I would suggest that vitamin K is not a miracle drug. It did increase survival rates, but it wasn't a huge effect. It wasn't, for example, as big as some of the effects we see with other phytonutrients, where they have clear anti-cancer effects and the mechanisms are well known. Some of the flavonoids, some of the carotenoids have clear anti-cancer mechanisms. Vitamin K is a little bit more controversial in its effects. How does vitamin K have anti-cancer effects? There are two real theories about this. One is the oxidative theory. One theory suggests that vitamin K is metabolized in cells and it's metabolized to quinones, and those quinones have pro-oxidative effects, and that causes oxidative effects in the cells, which then it causes the cells to be damaged through free radical damage. And it's interesting that some compounds such as tamoxifen also involve metabolism to these quinones. Flavonoids as well are broken down to quinones, and they're known to have anti-cancer effects. So there is a possibility that this route of metabolism of vitamin K causing oxidative effects in cells and damaging the cancer cells is a possibility. How that would translate into an anti-cancer effect in an organism as a whole is more difficult to say, but in cell culture experiments, certainly that is one theory. The other theory is the non-oxidative effect, where vitamin K actually has this post-translational modification effect to certain proteins in the cell, and this causes apoptosis, which is also known as cell death. It triggers the cell death in the cancer cells, and therefore it actually kills the cancer cells through some kind of cell signal route inside the cells, and interferes with the cell cycle. So there are two theories really about how vitamin K may have these anti-cancer effects. The anti-cancer effects of vitamin K are actually, from my point of view, from a nutritionist point of view, more interesting than that. Because if we look at where we find vitamin K1, the phyloquinone is found in the brassica family vegetables. Now, epidemiological studies are very interesting, and you can find associations, but it's very difficult to tell cause and effect. One thing that comes out from vitamin K research that I've noticed is that the brassica family vegetables have distinct anti-cancer effects. We know that brassica family vegetables contain compounds called glucosinolates, and those glucosinolates have been shown to have definitive anti-cancer effects in cell culture, in animals, and in humans. Now, if you have a high intake of vitamin K1 from brassica family vegetables, you have a lower risk of getting cancer, irrespective of whether the vitamin K has an anti-cancer effect or not, because you will have high intakes of brassica family vegetables. And this is more important to me. Looking at the diet as a whole, I would suggest that it's very important to take these foods with high amounts of vitamin K in, simply because they have other compounds in them as well. So does vitamin K1 have an anti-cancer effect? Well, it's a bit of a moot point, because the foods that it's found in are known to have anti-cancer effects. So it may have some anti-cancer effect, but if you look at the diet as a whole, these brassica family vegetables, it's much more important. They have a very clear anti-cancer effect. It's much more important to have high intakes of these vegetables for that reason. Do many people get vitamin K deficiencies? Not really. It's very difficult to get a vitamin K deficiency because vitamin K is very widely distributed in foods, and also we have our own synthetic factories in our guts that synthesize vitamin K for us. Our gut bacteria are able to synthesize a range of different menaquinones which have vitamin K activity. We absorb that vitamin K and therefore we produce our own vitamin K. So really vitamin K falls into one of these categories of a pseudo-vitamin. It's probably conditionally essential under certain conditions, but most people generally get so much in their diet and they synthesize enough themselves that they would never really get a deficiency. What form would you take if you did want to supplement? If there was a reason that you wanted to supplement with vitamin K, I would first suggest that you turned to whole foods. The brassica family vegetables are very good sources of vitamin K1 and green leafy vegetables, and you could get all the vitamin K you required from a healthy diet. You really don't need to supplement. If you did have to supplement, I would suggest that you would supplement with phyloquinone. You can get other forms of vitamin K in supplements, but phyloquinone is the form really that I think it's the form that seems to be most naturally associated with humans in terms of their diet, and therefore if I had to supplement myself, I'd probably turn to that form. The menaquinones, again, I mean, we synthesize them ourselves. There's no reason that you couldn't take those in supplemental form. I wouldn't turn to the man-made form of vitamin K simply because I don't believe that it exists in nature, and therefore it's not part of human nutrition. It is a drug. It may have vitamin K activity, but it's a synthetic man-made drug, and therefore I wouldn't take it because I'm not aware of any of the, for example, it might interfere with other pathways for other chemicals. You have to be very careful. It's always better to take the natural compounds because we know they don't have negative effects. But personally, I wouldn't take supplements of vitamin K. I think you can get adequate vitamin K from a healthy diet, and I always advocate that you shouldn't really take supplements unless you can't get those nutrients in your food. I always turn to food primarily as a source of my nutrients, and I then analyse my diet to see what I can't get through my food, and I will supplement with those things that I think are beneficial as tablets or capsules. But vitamin K, I think, really falls into the category of being so plentiful in food, and it encourages you to eat green leafy vegetables. If you want to go and get your vitamin K, go and eat green leafy vegetables, and it also encourages you to eat these brassica family vegetables, which have been shown to be have definitive anti-cancer effects. Of all the vegetables you could eat, they have probably the strongest anti-cancer effects of all of them. And they provide you with good amounts of vitamin K as well. So I hope that was interesting. That's just my ramblings and my thoughts on vitamin K. Go and eat green leafy vegetables to get your vitamin K, but just remember you've got synthetic factories inside you creating vitamin K all the time for you. That's the miracle that we have of our gut bacteria that synthesize all sorts of vitamins and compounds for us. If you have any comments on this video, please leave them in the comments box below, and I will try to get back to you as soon as possible.